Oh, there's people. Good morning, Unity Village Chapel. You guys have some good mojo here. Are you ready? Yeah. I can tell. As was mentioned, my name is Brenda, and I live in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. Yes, go Iowa! Just a little piece up the road from here. And I am tickled pink to be invited to be here with you this morning. I'm reminded during a couple of the songs, some real clear messages came through. I'm reminded it is a privilege for us to gather. And we don't take that privilege for granted. And I also want to take a moment to honor all of the spiritual communities that gather, knowing that God is there. Enough said about that. I just got a really strong message about that this morning. So I'm coming in on the tail end of your adventures in faith. Has it been much of an adventure? We're going to have to amp it up here, kids. An adventure of transformation, an adventure of deep discovery, an adventure of the mastery of self. Who's at the finish line? Yeah, a couple people actually put their hands up in the air. We've mastered what we can master right up to this now moment, have we not? Will there be more to master? Probably. Mastery of self. Don Miguel Ruiz. And he was here live and in color to kick off the series, which I thought was really awesome. Listen to his message, and a couple of things that he said really struck me. The first point was, as of this now moment, I am the sum of every decision I have made. The sum of every decision I have made. How's that feel? Sort of a yikes feeling? Or sort of a, that's cool, that makes sense, I get that. He talked about stepping over thresholds, stepping through boundaries and limitations, which of course are always self-perceived. So as we're moving through and past those decisions that have been made, a beautiful question arises. And Reverend Marianne and I were talking about this for just a moment before the service. What can I do next? No offense to the author, I would rephrase that question just a tad and say, who will I be next? This adventure is all about breaking barriers, right? Stepping over thresholds, stepping through limitations, to move into a consciousness so that we might show up in greater and greater degrees as our authentic, true divine self. What makes us a master? The few people that said that they're good, what made you a master? Life. Yes? I loved that when he said that. Man, opportunities for mastery just coming in right and left. Life makes us a master. And then in the second week, Reverend Erin talked about understanding our domestication, what we might call socialization, family systems, and recognizing our deep personal attachments. I gotta say, I'm used to a bigger lectern our personal attachments, like my attachment to a larger lectern, so I can put more stuff up here while we're talking. In this step, we grasp how our domestication has helped us form strong attachments, sometimes conscious, sometimes not so conscious. And in this step, we start to make that commitment for a deep transformation. And I love it that Reverend Erin mentioned we're not. Do I look okay? I love it that Reverend Erin said, we're not talking about transformation from a place of there's something wrong with me, which is sometimes kind of an easy place to go. But we're talking about transformation from a place of opening ourselves to truth, to deeper and deeper levels of allowing ourselves, for instance, to stop internal wars. Can anybody hear the mental mania, that hum? Opening that space so that we can discover who and what we came here to be. When we know ourselves, we know Source. Yes? When we know ourselves, we know Source. We work this step by first making no demands on outcomes. That's a piece of cake. I hit the pause button when Reverend Erin said that. No expectations for outcomes. Wow, that one idea, that one step in this whole journey, mastering that, talk about hashtag life goals, right? No demands for outcomes. There's nothing to do. There's no place else that we're supposed to be. And then in the third week, my Martha Creek, the great and mighty Martha Creek, joined Reverend Erin, and they talked about unconditional love, which is to say that it's about releasing our attachment to managing how others show up in our lives. Ooh. No expectation for outcomes. No management of how people show up and how they relate to me. It would appear, from this little corner of the universe, it would appear that we've been primarily domesticated for conditional love, have we not? And conditional love looks like this. Diane, if you're not meeting my demands, which is a whole framework of unspoken expectations that I have about you, if you're not meeting that, then you shall meet with my judgment and my punishment. I will withhold the goodies if you're not behaving the way I expect you to. Is that understood? So that's what goes on in relationship all of the time, and we never say it, do we? Sometimes we say it after the fact, when I say things like, Bill, I thought you meant we were going to XYZ. And then based on his response, sometimes I think, who else was in the car with me when we had that conversation? So conditional love. The fourth week was about triggers and traps. Recognize a trigger when you feel one? Fur on the back of your neck, curled lip, however you respond, because a trigger is a touch of the unhealed wound. And there are traps. Those traps are what I call our knee-jerk reaction. Something happens, I'm triggered, I react before thought. I might be the only one. Has anyone else ever been triggered? So the step that we do with that, first of all, is to become aware that we have been triggered, that a button has been pushed. Go within and do a little inquiry. What's going on here? What emotion is rolling? To be able to identify a feeling, to be able to name it. And then we take all of that into a space of meditation, creating that space for spirit to do its work in us. Have you noticed as we do this work, there are things that used to be triggers for us, and now we can watch that play out, and it's like, wow, there was no juice there. That feels good, doesn't it? When we recognize that moment. And then once we're in that meditative space, we've recognized the trigger, we've recognized the trap, the knee jerk, we've recognized the emotion, then we can shift that thought, that energy, that action into applying principle, truth, and law. An important point that was made in this phase of the journey is it's not about who's right and who's wrong. Now, did anybody grow up in a family system where right and wrong was a really big deal? Like, somebody had to be to blame, right? And man, my long time ago good friend and I used to have this joke, nobody's righter than we are. So think about that when we think about triggers and traps, our need to be right. And finally, last week, Erin talked about the cycle of autopilot thinking. I wonder what percentage of our day happens on autopilot. I don't know, 40, 80, 90? Really, truly. Have you ever been in the shower, and I have this certain process that I do, head, face, rinse, head, body, and sometimes I'll reach up to the shelf for the next product and think, did I do that already? I'm feeling better about myself because I'm going to tell myself that you're not laughing at me, that you're laughing with me. Autopilot. Through domestication, we learn to run on autopilot. We learn not to question our assumptions. We learn not to take a second look at our beliefs, our structures of knowing. And in autopilot, we actually trade who we are. We trade who we are, and we make up the persons that we think others need us to be. Yes? In this step, we're called to be something known as contrary warriors. Remember that when she talked about that? And it's not about being contrary to others. It's about being contrary to that autopilot. It's about being contrary to our norms and questioning our assumptions, our beliefs, our structures of knowing. And in this step, we can ask the question, what if, seriously, what if I could see this person, this situation, through a different lens? Is there more than one lens in the world? No. The whole world happens according to my lens. And there's nobody righter than me. So there's a zillion different options in any given encounter, any given situation. If we can just take that millisecond breath and that pause to put on a different lens and say, if I see Diane differently, then maybe our relationship would be different. Maybe I would respond differently with you. You think? Is that a possibility? You know, I feel like this series, this material, is about navigating our way through our babbling mental mania that was created by domestication. I know that you guys don't do a whole lot of Bible stuff around here. And when I was getting the information on the material and the series and so forth, what came to my mind was this story that's in the Hebrew Bible. There's a book called Genesis. And this story is about something called the Tower of Babel. You've heard of it. That's cool. So when we use the Bible in unity, when we read the Bible, we put on something called a metaphysical lens. And wow, once I got that pair of glasses, who knew the Bible was such a kick, right? I did not. So when we're putting on our metaphysical lens, we're looking beneath that literal story, beneath the literal words on the page. We are every character. We are every place, every location in the story. So our story, the Tower of Babel, follows this other big thing that happened. It rained for 40 days and 40 nights, and Noah got this cool memo that said, build a boat, put a bunch of animals on it, get your family, and go. So they floated around for 40 days and 40 nights. And then we had the flood, which is a symbol, an allegory, a picture of completely cleansing our consciousness. Fresh start. And then, if you care for me to read it to you, over the next 3 chapters, we read about all of Noah's descendants. You guys want to hear? It's all boys. So we have had the flood. We're getting ready to get off the boat. We're in Genesis chapter 11. And here's what happens next. Now the whole earth had one language. Wow. And the same words. As they migrated from the east, which way's east? As they migrated from the east, they came upon a plain in the land of Shinar and settled there. Then they said to one another, hey, let's make some bricks and burn them thoroughly. So they did that, and then they said, you know what? Let's build ourselves a city and a tower with its top way up to the heavens. Otherwise, we're going to end up being scattered all over the face of the earth. The Lord came down, because we all know, like from the cloud, right? White robe, long beard, big gold G. God came down to see the city and the tower. And he smacked his forehead. God said, holy cow. They are one people. They have but one language. And this is what they do. There's no end to what they could do, right? Because once we step over that threshold, once we break through that barrier. So God says, let's go down. Let's throw in a little challenge. Confuse their language so that they will not understand one another. Well, that explains a lot, doesn't it? When we think about relationships and what we think we said and then what they think we said and then how that gets told to somebody else and then it comes back to us and you're like, wait. So let's go down and confuse their language. They won't understand one another. The Lord scattered them abroad from there all over the face of the earth. And they left off building the city. Everybody got that interpretation all figured out? Let's review. We've just come through a very sacred spiritual process. Consciousness has been totally cleansed. We've got one language, true nature, divine law, wisdom, knowing that we are all one, that we are all deeply interconnected. So we hop off the boat, we make some babies for a couple generations, and lo and behold, living from divine wisdom and divine consciousness goes straight out the window. So talk about the power of falling asleep. Autopilot, domestication. So we get off the boat, we have those babies, and then from the east, we go to this place called Shinar. You know what Shinar is? This is going to be good for us to remember, to recognize, oh my gosh, I just took a wrong turn and I'm in Shinar. Shinar is about the divided mind. It's about duality. When we're in Shinar, we're in a place where we're not understanding their language. And of course, who's right and who's wrong. Now, when we set up these firm patterns of thinking, wherein somebody has to be the bad guy and somebody gets to be the Christian, it's called making bricks. And that's the first thing they do when they get there. Hey, let's make some bricks. So brick by brick, we set out our thinking. We set our domestication into a framework, and we build a city of how we see it, what we know, a structure of knowing. And in our city, because back in the day, cities were always built with walls and gates. Gated community, does that ring a bell? I guess it wasn't back in the day. I guess it's an ongoing thing. So we build that city, we build those walls, and we do what it takes to keep them out. But it doesn't stop there. Let's make a name for ourselves so everyone will know we are the CEO of the world. Let's build a tower that reaches way into the heavens. And in today's day and age, those towers have someone's name on them. You ever been to New York City? You ever been to Chicago? Let's build a tower way up into the sky. And this is what Ruiz calls exceptionalism. So like our friends in Shinar, we often act from that autopilot. We act from the intellect and our domestication and all the limitations that are inherent in that. And on this planet of somewhere around 8 billion, I don't know if we're just below or just over, on this planet of some 8 billion people, we have somehow managed to create infinite versions of us and them. Have we not? We have created infinite versions. And it appears that a whole lot of us are confused. We're baffled. And some of us are angry about the babble out there, right? The blusterous, defensive, attacking language. Well, then remember in our story, we've got that tower, we've made a name for ourselves. God comes down, which in my mind means God shows up. Not that God was ever not there, but we have the realization of presence. Greatly displeased. If we can do dumb stuff like that, it can only get worse from here, right? Does anybody over the past, I don't know, long time it feels like, do you feel like, well, it can't get any worse? And then it does. So let's throw in a challenge. Let's confuse their language so that we're not understanding one another. We have an us and them. So when God shows up and says, well, this isn't working, so let's scatter them all over the earth. Let's confuse them so that they don't understand one another's language. Can we not possibly see this as an opportunity for expanding our minds, expanding our awareness, expanding our boundaries from exclusivity to inclusivity, expand our understanding that everyone has a name. Everyone has an identity, a sacred spiritual identity. So, in light of what's going on in our country, in our world at large, when we pause to consider that we truly are all in this together, this thing called life, we're all in this together. Would we agree that exceptionalism might not be the way to go? Our boat may be spinning in circles as long as we're continuing the us and them mentality. What if we realized that there's only one boat, that we're all on that boat, and that we are all interconnected through Source? What if we could behave like contrary warriors, not contrary to others, but with the intention of dismantling our own towers, taking down those gates, those walls, those bricks? When it comes to different governments, different political parties, different ideology, religious beliefs, we have many different languages, do we not? Many different languages, many ways of thinking. And it doesn't make them the bad guy. It doesn't make them the tyrant. It doesn't make them wrong. I invite us to pay attention to that. And when we build those walls, both invisible and visible, we build them around ourselves, around our family, around our spiritual community. When we build those walls, it's a slippery slope to creating our own Tower of Babel. We make a name for ourselves. I am a liberal. I am a conservative. I am a Christian. I am a Muslim. I am a Jew. I am a white supremacist. I am a bully. I am a peacemaker. I'm an activist. We make a name for ourselves. Shall we do that consciously? Because as we're making these names for ourselves, we are unwittingly playing that domestication card of exceptionalism. We're against. I saw a post on Facebook last week. One of my former congregants, and also my niece posted the same thing. But it had this symbol of hands joined together, and then the caption was, against anti-Semites. And I laid there in bed looking at that thinking, so if the symbol is we're all joined together, what the heck? I feel like a huge message I've gotten from Unity over the years is, don't tell me what you stand against. Tell me what you stand for. So I just want to be clear, because some of you know me and not all of you do. I'm not here delivering a subtext of submission to tyranny, to terror, to fear. We can be activists. In fact, it's up to us to be activists. We can stand for a higher good. Yes? Amen. We can stand for a higher good and not using our energy standing against. something. Anybody ever hear that unity bumper sticker, that which we resist persists? I remember that from my second unity minister. She used to say it to me a lot, so there must have been something there to clean up. Possibly. So Ruiz reminds us that as we step into our authentic nature, as we step into mastery of self, both on an individual basis and on a collective basis, we impact our entire world. I was saying to Diane before the service, I have so much energy around the parliament of world religions coming together. Diane, you said it was like 10,000 people. 10,000 people from around the world, from different structures of knowing, from different beliefs and ideologies. They've come together. And for me, that's a full-body goosebump, because I am praying, I am knowing, I am affirming that that kind of energy makes a shift on our planet. Makes a shift. So in this highly political week, and most interesting of times, I'm merely here to invite you to ask yourself a question. Ready? Of what am I the master? Of what? That's all I have to say about mastery of self and towers of Babels.